Been a big week for the Villa, and we are back with a brand new episode of Talk of the Trinity. But how could we start it any other way than really getting excited about the biggest Villa news this season? At the awards night, Danny Ings won goal of the season, and what a cracking finish that was. We also signed Philip Coutinho. That's amazing news as well. This is Talk of the Trinity.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Talk of the Trinity podcast. I am Baz Barrett. With me is not Will Forrest, but don't worry, you will be hearing from him later on in this podcast where he will be bringing you his thoughts from a undisclosed secret location, probably his front room. But if you can't wait to hear Mr. Trinity himself for that long, then you can check out past episodes on our YouTube channel at Talk Trinity or Talk of the Trinity now, or you can log on to one of our audio providers, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, Google, Geezer, Deezer, some other ones that no doubt we have signed up for in the last week since our previous podcast. Or you can just, if you don't want to, for whatever reason, live past glories of previous episodes of our podcast, you can just check out the latest Villa news and engage in the latest Villa polls and conversation on our Twitter page at Talk Trinity. We appreciate all the likes, subscribes, and engagements that we have from all the fans. You know, we're coming to the end of the first season of running the podcast. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who has engaged with us. But speaking of engagement, there's been a lot going on in the last week or so. And so got to delve straight in to the double header, the Saturday-Tuesday combo that started at Turf Moor, and Burnley 1, Villa 3. And there was a little bit of a surprise, I think you could say, in the team sheets when they were announced at round about 2 o'clock, because there appeared to be, in terms of Callum Chambers playing defensive midfield instead of the usual rotation that he'd had with Konza over the last few months. And also there was no place for Philip Coutinho. I mean, we touched upon it in the preview to the Burnley game of whether he would start on Saturday. And we thought that if there was an issue of fitness, wanting him fresh for the Tuesday game against Liverpool, that he wouldn't play or wouldn't start against Burnley. And that's precisely what happened. Buendia came into the team and, safe to say, put in a very good performance, got on the score sheet, great assist for the first goal for Danny Ings. You know, he has a record of scoring against his former clubs, and it was a great finish early on. Really set the tempo for the game. We didn't celebrate out of respect, but I think the Villa fans were very early on of what was anticipated by us and some others, not just us, to have been a tricky away game with Burnley in form going into that game since their managerial appointment. But although there was a fight back of sorts in the first half from Burnley, they didn't lie down. The game was all over 7 minutes into the second half when Ollie Watkins got on the end of a John McGinn cross to make it 3. And there's been talk throughout the Gerrard era, but also going before that, in terms of not being able to put together that 90-minute performance. And they did against Burnley. I mean, quite literally, because the goal for Burnley was in the 91st minute after we'd maybe switched off for stoppage time with the job done. But Gerrard himself said after the game that that was probably the best performance, give or take 5 minutes in either half, that had been since his time at Villa. And it was a very conclusive performance, I'd say, in terms of a game whereby took it by the scruff of the neck against a team who had probably more to play for than we did in a Premier League survival sense. Players from the Villa side perhaps playing for their futures. The team going into next season, only a few players who you might think are guaranteed a place in the squad. A couple we might touch upon later on in the episode. But to be able to go into what could have been quite an intimidating atmosphere, go in, silence the crowd early on and get that result was very positive indeed. Now I will leave my co-host to talk a little more about the tactical shape, should he wish to do so. We mentioned in terms of what was almost diamond formation in midfield and two up front, and it did the job. And great stats in terms of, I think it was our biggest away win at Burnley since 1929, or a time that was quite a long time ago for most of us. But a time that wasn't quite so long ago was Tuesday night at Villa Park. Villa 1, Liverpool 2. But it was a case of what might have been, really. I mean, we talked about in terms of the Burnley game on Saturday, perhaps there was an expectation of a draw being a good result, that Burnley would be up for us, having something to play for. Liverpool had something to play for as well, but very much at the other end of the table. But you wouldn't really have been able to tell in those opening exchanges that it was Liverpool playing for the title after Villa's fast start to the game, going ahead after 3 minutes. Douglas Luiz through, quite some uncharacteristically poor goalkeeping by his standards. And, the cliches about the most dangerous time in football is after you've conceded a goal. Liverpool, less than 2 minutes later, have equalised. Not the greatest from a defensive perspective from Villa. But during the course of that first half, whilst I wasn't quite believing it was going to be 7-2 again, there were some characteristics in terms of that previous game, because Liverpool were off it. I mean, making a lot of mistakes, been hassled into mistakes from Villa's pressing game, which was a trick taken out of the Liverpool book, in terms of it's a tactical style associated with Liverpool in terms of putting pressure on the opposition high up the pitch to create mistakes. And Liverpool had a similar poor approach, really. I mean, they had a lot of changes to the team. I think there was Salah on the bench. There was perhaps a little surprise at that. Curtis Jones playing in midfield, hasn't really played many games this season. Naby Keita has played a few more games, but you wouldn't say has established himself in the team. And it was really in that midfield where Villa, who made changes of their own, the Camber came in and Coutinho came in as well, and really putting pressure on Liverpool in the first half. And a fairly even game, in terms of feeling in it. And it's unfortunate in terms of Sadio Mane loves scoring against Villa, doesn't he? 9 goals in 10, I think it is. Something stupid. But you could say Villa, they were feeling positive after the first hour, and that was evidenced by the change. Chukwuemeka coming on from the Camber, an attacking change, a very bold attacking change. And it's you almost, well, I'm not going to say almost, able to feel the way the game was going and feeling we were able to go toe for toe with Liverpool in order to go for the win. I'm not going to criticise Gerrard too much for that. I mean, the balance of the game wasn't us having to hold on for dear life. And Coutinho, he was kept fresh, so he looked sharp. I mean, Buendia, again, if you looking at it in terms of a performance per minute ratio, I think he lifted the crowd. I think he gained confidence from his Saturday performance, not letting the fact he didn't start affects him too much. And he looked lively when he came on. I mean, unfortunately, in terms of Ollie Watkins had to go off injured at time recording, not entirely sure how serious that injury is. Traore came on, and that's always a difficult ask, really. I mean, in terms of we didn't have any, strikers on the bench. I mean, Traore came up to play a little further forward, but if you're thinking you're wanting someone to score a goal, just because he hasn't really played much this season, I don't think he started this season. So perhaps running out of steam a little bit near the end. And unfortunately, in terms of mentioned Danny Ings, great finish against Burnley on Saturday. Had chances in this game, really should have scored a couple of goals. No doubt my co-host, Mr. Ings himself, Mr. Trinity, will have a few words to say about that. I mean, it was a cracking finish for the goal that got disallowed. I mean, you can't argue with that. What a finish. It was just, unfortunately, he was comfortably offside. And you look in terms of, probably would have expected a defeat to Liverpool before, to be honest. Are you a glass half full? Are you a glass half empty person in terms of really giving them a good game? Arguably should have got something out of the game in terms of a factor. You don't really like to go on too much because it just sounds like making excuses, but the ref was dreadful. I mean, in terms of absolutely dreadful. And, I think Gerrard's reaction in the post-match conference said it all in terms of that ref's performance. And that had an effect, on the players and on the tempo of the game. And, you often don't want to criticise refs too much, but, I don't think that performance is going down in the Hall of Fame as a brilliant refereeing performance, and I don't think Liverpool were too impressed with him either on occasion. So when you have kept yourself in the game against one of the best teams in the league, you got to take that as a positive. If you're being negative, which I'm contractually obliged, being called negative Baz by my co-host, to bring in some negative things, but if ever there was a real chance to get a result out of that game, a positive result, a point, a draw, and we just, you got to take your chances, and we didn't take them. I know there is an element that we let Liverpool off the hook a little bit, which is, slightly disappointing, and it's been mentioned repeatedly. Villa's record against top 8 teams, I think I only got points against Man United this season, only one win, lost the rest. That's going to be something hanging over Gerrard's Villa team until something gets done about it. Man City, end of the season, nice place to start on the last day. But no, that is where the summer recruitment drive is going to be judged on. Can Villa get results against the so-called bigger teams? I mean, we'll say teams who are higher up the league than Villa. That's where it's going to be judged. And speaking of recruitment, just briefly mention that before we go on to my preview of Sunday's game against Crystal Palace, Philippe Coutinho permanently announced 4-year deal at Villa for, I think it's fee quoted in the region of 17 million. I mean, that's pretty good business. Hopefully it is the first of many positive results that we will be celebrating in terms of the transfer market over the course of the summer. And speaking of celebrating positive results, brings me nicely on to the Crystal Palace game on Sunday, 2 p.m, Villa Park. And will the Villa be celebrating a positive result come full time round about 4 o'clock? And on paper, you could say 2 fairly evenly matched teams in terms of, if you were looking at the league table, both at time of recording, which is before the weekend's fixtures started. Crystal Palace 11th, Villa 12th, Palace on 44 points, Villa on 43. So you could say a fairly even season. Obviously, Palace had a very good cup run, got to the semi-finals, and you may have suspected that may lead to petering out of the rest of the season after not being able to take that final step. But they're in decent form. On paper, again, the paper's doing a lot of talking. They've won their last 2 games. They're unbeaten in 3. But you have a look in terms of they beat Palace beat Watford at home last time out 1-0. I mean, Watford, didn't quite go to plan in terms of Watford and their attempts to stay in the Premier League. In terms of, I think they've lost until Everton at home, which followed this game for Watford. They lost every single home game, which, you're not staying up. And which person thought that Watford would get some home wins between the end of March and the rest of the season? You'll have to check out the Premier League predictor that we did at the end of March to find out who that was. But Palace, you'd expect them to beat Watford at home. They beat Southampton away previously. Again, perhaps a result you'd expect with Southampton in a not very good run of form currently. Drew at home to Leeds again. You might expect them to do more against Leeds in terms of they are also struggling at the wrong end of the table. But they have Zaha back in form. I say back in form. I mean, there was a few years ago he was linked with a move away. It didn't happen. Didn't have a good start to the following season from what I can recall. But he's been in fairly decent form last couple of years, but just kind of fallen off the radar as the bigger clubs have moved on to shinier targets. And speaking of shinier targets, a couple of young guns in the Palace team who've really contributed to their success this season. Gahey, centre-back, got himself called up to the England squad. Conor Gallagher, only on loan, but also called up to the England squad largely as a result of his performances for Palace. Eze, back fit after missing most of the season through injury. Elise, another young prospect they brought from Reading, which is a testament to the job that Vieira's done, because under previous manager, funnily enough, the Roy Hodgson derby, Palace Watford, but they were quite an old team, but they had a turnover in the summer, and whilst they still have some more experienced players there, they've really made a step to look into the future, and it works out really well for Patrick Vieira, and he's done a very good job. I mean, in terms of predictions, has he done enough to win Manager of the Year? We did a show, me and Will, with David the Irish Lions, where we talk about that. Have a listen to that when that comes out to see what we've got to say about Vieira. But moving on to Sunday's game, so they're in a decent run of form, doing what you'd expect them to do. But as seen on Tuesday when Villa are at home to Liverpool, when the crowd can play a part in this, crowd can really lift the team. And for Villa, obviously 3 home games on the bounce. Burnley next Thursday, which we'll be bringing a preview episode to you in the run up to that game. So listen out for that. But Palace, not to be underestimated. Good team, good season, good players. But whilst opinions may differ in terms of whether Villa have had a good season or not, I don't think there's anything to fear in terms of if you're comparing the 2 respective lineups. Villa, obviously, a strong team. We're talking about Burnley, Liverpool, different players, different formations, different teams. So we do have the option to mix it up a bit. I would suspect in terms of maybe a slightly less defensive approach against Palace as well on the team sheet in terms of how we'll settle against Palace. Will Nakamba play? Possibly. I mean, in terms of another question is the 2 up front going to remain? At time of recording, unsure about whether Ollie Watkins is going to be fit for Sunday's game. If he's not, do we change the shape? Do we get Buendia and Coutinho in the same team, 2 behind the 1? Then 3 midfield, 4-3-2-1, which you may suspect is Gerrard's preferred formation. If Watkins is not fit, yeah, I probably would. I get Coutinho. I'd get Buendia in the same team. Buendia's in form. Coutinho, that new contract, that new signing bounce. Fans are going to be really showing their appreciation for Coutinho. So, yeah, if Watkins isn't fit, then I would change the shape. And then in terms of the midfield three behind them, again, time of recording, not entirely sure of who's going to be fit in that midfield three. I mean, obviously, I'm contractually obliged as the president of the John McGinn fan club to say John McGinn plays in that game. Do you play Luis? I mean, there was a feeling he had a little bit of a point to prove on Tuesday. Put in a decent performance, I thought, in terms of, do you have him in a slightly more advanced role than expecting him to be the defensive player at the base of that midfield three? And if you are playing a more defensive player, do you play the Canberra, as we mentioned, or do you play Tim? Do you play Chambers in terms of that defensive midfield role if we have somebody sitting in front? For that, in terms of if you are seeing Chambers as an option next season to play that defensive midfield role, I would play him there. If you're looking in terms of he is going to be first choice centre back next season or certainly for consideration, I'd play Tim in that game. And I think the selection will demonstrate a lot in terms of how Gerrard sees his options going ahead of next season. I mean, in terms of the defence, you'd have to suspect Cash, Digne, Martinez, Mings probably pick themselves. I know there was some further criticism of Mings on Tuesday. We'll have to see what the summer brings in respect of that. I mean, every position is up for grabs, apart from Coutinho's, so he just signed. But yeah, I mean, you've got to welcome that competition for places in terms of if there's improved quality, that's only going to improve the team. And there may potentially be no room for sentimentality, even for the captain. I mean, in terms of where is going to be best possible finish for Villa this season. I mean, realistically, if you come 10th, that's in terms of you have to expect at least 2 wins out of 3 in order to even consider kind of that position. I mean, the time recording, Newcastle in 14th have 43, Brighton in 9th have 47. So not a lot, covering quite a few teams in the league. But then, even if we do come 10th, I mean, 9th, I'd suspect maybe beyond us. But 10th, is that enough for most of the players to say that we are guaranteed a place in the team or should be? I don't think so. And as we touched upon earlier with Coutinho, it'd be interesting to see what we do in the summer. But bringing it back to what we are going to do on Sunday, this leads me to my prediction for the game. And the weather forecast said it's going to rain. So I have to bring the sunshine, which is a role reversal based on previous previews in this podcast. But I think in terms of 2 teams, mid-table, not too much to play for. Villa perhaps with a bit of an edge in terms of the quality in the starting 11, though Palace got some very good players. With the home crowd advantage, I'm going to go for a Villa win. I'm going to go Villa 2, Palace 1. And I think it will be a latish winner for Villa. But I do think we are going to get the job done and hopefully gives us a bounce ahead of a midweek game against Burnley, where you would expect a lot is going to be riding on that game for Burnley. So a slightly different set of circumstances between those 2 respective fixtures. But before we even get to that, I've got to pass you over to my co-host, Will Forrest, Mr. Trinity himself, from an undisclosed secret location. So he will be giving you his thoughts on what's happened and what is about to happen. But from me, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with you again soon.
There you go. You've got the Baz bit over now, and it's time for me to recap on a couple of games and also look forward to Palace at the weekend. Now, contrary to what Baz says about my secret location, it's not my living room, unless you're stood outside looking in at this time that I'm recording and notice that I am sat in my living room, in which case you're probably a voyeur, a Villa voyeur. There we go. Maybe that'll be a new part of the show. So, Burnley, first of all, last weekend, took the game to them, was worried that it would be a draw. We know that Burnley have got a lot of fight in them. They've got a lot to fight for. But You know, it was a thriller for the Villa in the fact that we stormed to a 3-1 victory, and we could have had more goals. Don't get me wrong, Burnley created some chances through Weghorst. Aaron Lennon probably could have done a bit better with the click to the back post, but we were also getting forward. We were also testing Nick Pope, and it just went to show those margins, those fine moments of magic that really won us the game. I've said many times, and it was bound to happen at some point. You put Danny Ings one-on-one with the keeper, and he's going to score. You know, that's the player that you want there. No disrespect to Ollie Watkins. However, with Watkins, I've said, he's the type of striker who will score around the box, willing to throw himself at the ball to get a goal. And what a fantastic diving header that was from an absolutely pinpoint John McGinn cross. I bet Baz was chatting about that all week to anybody who would listen, and fair play. You know, it was good. But the main man in that game really was Emi Buendia. What absolute beautiful poise to play that through ball for the first goal, and then his movement for the second. You know, Gerrard said that he needed to contribute more. He got a goal and an assist. He's the name on every Villa fan's lips in regards to who should be starting, and that's over world-class Philippe Coutinho, the third richest player in the world at one point. You know, still is, you know. So we were brilliant. We were brilliant. We let the late goal in. It looked like a mix-up at the back. Consa made a couple of mistakes, really. You could attribute that one to Mings as well. But they got through. They bagged the goal. Hopefully, you know, goal difference doesn't cost us too much towards the end of the season. Being on -1 isn't too bad with the cluster of teams around us. So we were buoyed by that performance, especially the likes of Chambers and Douglas Luiz as well. We step up to Liverpool, and the team sheet for Liverpool was the first one I really looked at, to be honest with you. Seeing that there was no Robertson, seeing that Thiago and Salah were on the bench, but then actually seeing the team sheet and thinking, wow, this is still a very, very good team. We saw that Marvelous Nakamba came back in. I think that was a very good selection. You know, he gave his all. It's good to have him back in to provide that defensive cover against the better teams so that you can push forward Luka Din and Matty Cash. And once again, we created chances against Liverpool. Watkins at the start, though, may have been ruled out for offside. Danny Ings with the header that went just over the bar, following the free kick routine. Should he have glanced it? He went through as well and got he had his effort smothered really by Alisson, and he scored an absolutely brilliant goal that got disallowed. Jamie Carragher banging on about the strike. So you can see the confidence is there for him. Watkins was tracking back hard, working hard for the team as well. It's a shame he picked up an injury, and we'll see how that impacts my starting 11 against Crystal Palace. Though, for those of you who may have already been onto Twitter and seen my own personal profile, you'll have noticed that I've responded to Liam at the Qatar Lions. Their Twitter handle is at Aston Lions. For anybody who isn't following them, definitely worth a follow, especially if you're out in Qatar. But you know, Douglas Luiz again played really well as a number 8. We know that that's his best position. It seems to be his preferred position as well. Did very well to rise for the header and then follow it up and score. Both his goals at Villa Park this season coming as tap-ins in front of that north stand. So we wouldn't mind seeing another one of them on Sunday, if we're honest, and again next Thursday as well. But he controlled the game very well, and he had that freedom because of Nakamba. You've got John McGinn, who put in another all-action performance for the team. The back four were resolute enough. We could have done better with the first goal. Nakamba and Mings could have done better. They were very unlucky that Martinez, his save, fell to the feet of Matip, and he had a simple tap-in, you know, and it coming just minutes after the first opener for us. didn't really help. The second goal, obviously there was the short ball from Carney to Dougie, and then the counter, and Sadio Mane scoring against us again. I think though really that you can take a lot of positives out of the game. We didn't just settle for counter-attacking. It wasn't a case of, we know Liverpool need to score 4 goals to go top, let's do damage limitation. No, we took the game to them also. Philippe Coutinho had that rasping effort in the first half after the beautiful bits of skill over Trent Alexander-Arnold's head. He was looking confident, megging players as he went along as well, taking them on. It was definitely one of the better Coutinho games for a while, and it justifies him starting. But you also had to feel a bit sorry for Emi after the way he played against Burnley. But what a great situation for Gerrard to be in, that he's got 2 absolutely top-class players there that can play in that one position, or if he wants to, and I expect him to, go back to a 4-3-2-1, then he's got both of them that can play behind Danny Ings or Ollie Watkins, maybe even behind Jonathan David, if you believe the rumours. What an exciting signing that would be. Though, that's enough from me about Liverpool and the defeat. I don't want to dwell on defeat anymore. I want to look ahead to Palace. And Baz has rightly pointed out some very good Palace players that they've got. Gay, Gallagher, Elise, Easy have done brilliantly for Palace since joining them. Easy coming back to full fitness as well. You've got Wilfried Zaha, who would light up any team in our part of the Premier League, and he'd also go and do it, I imagine, for a lot of the Sky Six as well. Joachim Anderson, a player who I rate very highly. Have a listen to our Team of the Year or Team of the Season podcast with Dave Martinez, Dance Dave. I talk about him on there. Palace have shown that they're solid enough defending wise, but they've got that attacking flair as well. And they're going to try to cause us problems. They obviously want to finish in the top half, same as us. We're challenging in that same part of the Premier League. And it's a part of the Premier League which is a bit like snakes and ladders at the moment, where you feel one slip up and you're down 3 or 4 places. Look at Newcastle, but you get a couple of wins and you're climbing that ladder. Brighton, for example. So it's going to be a game where we both want to win, and with 2 exciting young managers in Vieira and Gerrard, who both are elite, or both were elite midfielders, they're really going to be wanting to outdo each other. Unfortunately, last time, we got the upper hand. One player we won't have to help us, though, on this occasion is Matty Targett, who is with Newcastle. So I expect to see Luca Dean again at left-back, and I expect to see him carry on through the rest of the season. He's going to be key to thwarting the right winger of Palace, whether that's Elise or somebody else, maybe a Jordan Ayew. And on that left wing, of course, Wilf Zaha is a player that we will need to watch. They'll also have Easy pushing up through the centre. We've got to get our supporters player of the season, Matty Cash, in that right-back position, taking the game to Zaha, going toe-to-toe with him, not doing a Tyrone Mings from a year or so ago where he got sent off against Palace in what was a bit of a daft couple of bookings. But Cash needs to get into him. I don't think Mings will do the same again. I was deliberating whether to keep Mings in the team or to really use the squad, but I would do. Keep him in the team, keep him as captain, and keep Konsa alongside him. Konsa's only going to get better with games, and that's a shame for Chambers again after his performance against Burnley. But it would be Konsa who is starting in that role for me, and of course Emi Martinez would have to be in goal. Apart from those guys, as I say, Chambers is a potential player who could come in. You've got Ashley Young who could come in. You've got Ben Crishen, who's who's a potential availability as well. So you're really thinking, what do we do? Who do we play? Though I think the lineup picks itself. However, after saying that Chambers doesn't start in defence, I would have Callum Chambers starting as my defensive midfielder because of the likes of Eze, because of the likes of Conor Gallagher, who want to get forward, get into the box. Callum Chambers offers that little bit of defensive cover. He can put his foot on the ball, he can pass it around. It gives Nakamba a bit of a rest after playing against Liverpool and hopefully frees him up for Burnley. Though, if Chambers does well, don't drop him. My two midfield players alongside Chambers are probably going to make you double tap to rewind 15 or 10 seconds and think, what? Because McGinn is rested for me. I give McGinn a rest. Not for any other reason apart from giving opportunities to a couple of players. Sanson isn't a player who I give an opportunity to. I know I bang that drum. I imagine I'll be banging that drum and waving in the summer when he departs. JJ Ramsey, I think it's too soon to start him. Leave him on the bench, bring him on, or play him against Burnley. Douglas Luiz continues in centre midfield, and hopefully him playing there and seeing that he's getting chances as that number 8 will lead him to sign a new contract. You know, it's a big decision for Gerrard on what to do this summer, and if he isn't signing, surely he will be sold, and we'll probably be looking at about 20 to 25 million for him, I would imagine. I don't think we'll get the 30 that was rumoured in the January transfer window, but Dougie's shown what he can do there, and hopefully in doing so puts a bit of weight behind positions for next season and gets him a contract that he deserves. Remember, he's only young. He's got a lot of potential, and with someone like Steven Gerrard coaching him, he could really fulfil that. Alongside both of them, another player who has a lot of potential is disputing a contract offer, but he's starting to get a bit more game time recently, and that helps towards this decision. Carney Chukwuemeka, if it's that Chukwuemeka or his agent, his brother, his sister, his neighbour, his cat, his dog, whoever it is that's talking to Steven Gerrard and the club says, look, he needs to see before the end of the season that he's getting chances in the first team, then Gerrard's done the right thing in bringing him on as the first sub in the last 2 games, because we don't want to lose a talent like him. And if we do, we're only going to be getting 10 to 15 million for him, you know, if that, from a top European team, I would imagine. Maybe a Dortmund looking to reinvest their Haaland money. So I give Carney a start against Palace. Tell him to get on the ball. Tell him to show what he can do. Tell him that, you know, if he really puts the effort in and he tries hard for the team and he creates and he breaks up play, then you'll get the match. If he gets the match and he does well, then you've got to look at that again for Burnley. If he doesn't, you know, you take him off whenever you do, and you reevaluate him in training. You talk to him. You potentially put him in against Burnley. Then you can mix up the Douglas Luiz situation and put McGinn in, or you can just go back with JJ. You know, it's nice to have these options, but I'd like to see Carney get that opportunity. I really would. I hope he stays, but if his heart's not in it, don't bother with him. Give someone like Sanson a chance, a player who wants to do well for the club. Tommy O'Reilly even, or just stick with the tried and trusted John McGinn. Now, front three, and we believe that Gerrard will go with the 1 and a 2. But after Watkins picked up that knock, I wouldn't start him on Sunday. I'd give him a bit more of a rest. I'd play him against Burnley, and I'd play him against Man City on the last day and go back to that 2 up top. Maybe I'd go for the 2 and the 1 this time round. Obviously, Bailey is out injured. He's still in the doctor's room with Courtney Hawes. Watkins hopefully would be fit enough to be on the bench. We've got Traore, who got some game time in the last match, though. I don't see Bertrand Traore sticking round, if I'm completely honest with you. That's a conversation for our summer transfer window predictions special, which hopefully we'll have the whole gang available for, including those that I've mentioned before, Connor Sherry, and also Russell from the Cayman Lions. Now, I go with Buendia and Coutinho, and I tell them to just run around the pitch, get into the spaces, get on the ball, cause problems for their central midfielders and their centre-backs, get in between those lines and make players have to pick them up to create spaces for one another, for Carney and Dougie, but also for the main man up top, Danny Ings. Oh, Danny Ings, yet again. Is this all he ever thinks about, Danny Ings? Is this the only player he ever talks about? Is he going to do a Danny Ings special one-off podcast? It has been touted. In all seriousness, it has been touted. Blame Dave Martinez, Dance Dave, for that if and when it happens. Danny Ings has got 6 goal contributions in his last 8 games, 3 goals and 3 assists. He's shown he can drop that bit deeper and he can set up his teammates. He's done so for Ollie Watkins, Leon Bailey, Matty Cash with some of those Harry Kane type of movements. But he can also be predatory in the box, as we saw against Norwich and against Burnley. Scored against Southampton not so long ago as well. And we've only 7 goals this season. You'd be fair enough to worry, but you think about the injuries, you think about the times he hasn't been in the team. You think back to his first season at Southampton where he got 7 league goals as well. And then he came alive. Now, I know that by saying just put him up front, it makes you think, he doesn't like Watkins. I do like Watkins. I like his partnership with Ings. I really think that they're starting to form an understanding, and that's coming because of their game time. And Liam at the Qatar Lions, he came back to me already about my starting 11, and he thinks that Stevie G will allow the Watkins partnership to bond. He also believes that Carney will get testers on what he would miss, whether he's starting or whether it's 30-minute sub-appearances. He wants to see Douglas Luiz as an 8, thought he was brilliant. Doesn't want to see him as a number 6 again. Giving him assurances he'll always be a number 8. So, that diverts a bit to the midfield selection, but I'm glad to see that he agrees. Whether you interpret it that way or not, I do. But yes, for me, we go back to that Christmas tree, the 4-3-2-1. Martinez, Cash, Consa, Mings, Dean, Louise, Chambers, Carney, Buendia, Coutinho, Ings. I think it allows Ings to get in between Anderson and Gay and cause them some problems. Coutinho and Buendia to get forward and support as well. It'll allow Carney, Louise, Dean and Cash to get up top and support too. I imagine Palace, as lovely as the football is that they play, may go a bit more counter-attacking against us and may try to exploit us when we've got Mings, Chambers and Consa as the free back with the fullbacks pushing on. But I would hope we would have enough to put them to the sword to get the 3 points. Now, I know that Baz went for a Villa win. He went for a close scoring game. I think it's going to be a close score as well. I do think that there will only be 1 goal in it. Palace are going to get 2. It pains me to say that Palace will get 2 against us, and it'll be Conor Gallagher that pops up, and Wilfried Zaha will also score in front of the whole end, and he'll stick his tongue out, do a Zulu celebration or something. He'll do something to try and wind the fans up. But as much as it pains me to say that, it absolutely delights me to say that Villa will get 3. Aston Villa 3, Crystal Palace 2. And I wouldn't be surprised to see an Emi Buendia and Philip Coutinho masterclass with one of those two getting on the score sheet. Obviously, I want to see our main striker getting on the score sheet as well. But in all honesty, as with the rest of you Villa fans, I couldn't really care less who scores as long as we win the game. We win, it's helping us even more getting into that top half of the table. We can look towards the Burnley game. I'm sure we'll preview that before the match this week because none of us have got any upcoming holidays. I'm going to be there at Burnley. I'm taking my lad to the game, so if you're about, make sure to say hello. We're happy to take selfies and also sign autographs. In regards to the taking selfies, we're happy to take a selfie of you if you need just someone to hold your phone and take the picture. £5 a time. Anyway, we hope you enjoyed the game. Have a listen to us on all the places that Baz said. Download the episodes. Have a little gander of our YouTube page, Talk of the Trinity. There's a lot of past episodes on there where we've had contributions from other Villa fans. We've done one interview actually with Jamie Gray. We've spoken to opposition fans previously. Haven't done that for a while, so that's something that we'll hopefully get to do again next season. But until then, if you're going to the game, just remember to get behind the lads. Remember to really get into full voice. You've got a full house there. There's 20,000 other fans who are baying for blood, wanting to get down to the matches and get a season ticket as well. It's a great time to be a Villa fan, especially after the signing of Philippe Coutinho, which we know has made everybody happy. The feel-good factor around the club, the players that we're linked with. This is a time to be excited, Villa fans. It doesn't feel like another false dawn. This feels like the real McCoy. If you go in tomorrow, stay safe. Hope you enjoy the game. And as always, Villa till I die. Cheers, Tar. Thank you very much. Up the Villa.